Hi, folks. We are back for the final installment of the Interwar years. Now, some of this you don't actually have notes for, and it's mostly just for me to illustrate a point. And I'm hoping not to take too long with this one, but we're just gonna sort of do the whole end of the lecture all at once, so it might be a little bit longer than some of the other ones. Sorry about that, but we're just gonna push through. It wouldn't be worth it to have like a 2-minute video and a 15-minute video. So I'm still going to set a timer just so I know how long I'm taking. The last time we were talking about Hitler's rise to power and what allowed him to do that. So what allowed Hitler to take power? There were a lot of different reasons that contributed to this. It feels weird to write Hitler in pink. Like, for me, pink is such a nice happy color, and Hitler's like, oh, I don't know, the worst. So depressing. One of them is resentment from the Treaty of Versailles, and also from like soldiers and veterans who thought that they were treated badly, but also just sort of regular Germans. There is the incompetency of the Weimar Republic, where they have lots of things that they need to be doing, but it's not happening, kind of a thing. They just don't have the democratic tradition to be able to take care of these things. Also, they're not strong enough. There's also huge economic problems with the Great Depression. And whenever there's economic chaos, it leads to political chaos. Economic chaos leads to political chaos. That's one reason why I think people are really working very hard during this pandemic to try and keep the economy up and running, is because everybody knows that economic chaos leads to political chaos. And so we're trying to avoid political chaos by keeping economic chaos in hand. And so all of these things also just sort of lead to a desire to blame somebody, a desire for a strong leader, a desire for somebody to do something good. And Hitler starts off by addressing all of these things. So everybody is like, man, I'm really resentful of the way we were treated during the Treaty of Versailles. And he's like, oh, I can help with that. I will help build our armies. I will give you something to root for. I will bring back national pride. The only problem is it's national pride at a huge cost, because for Hitler, it's not enough to have pride in being German. It's German specifically as nationality, and if you don't fit exactly what he says is German, you are eliminated. So it's not like they're saying, German is the best, and we'll just sort of live toleratingly, cooperatively with everyone else. We'll just think of ourselves as being the best. No, it's like, we're the best, and we're going to kill anybody who doesn't fit our mold. And many of these things that are in our mold, you either are born with or tough, So as we can see over here, we're talking about the Aryan race. Now, when Hitler is talking about the Aryan race, he is mostly talking about these blue-eyed, blonde-haired people. I almost said blue-haired, blonde-eyed people. He's talking about this sort of very stereotypical German look. Because again, there are also plenty of different types of Germans. Actually, it turns out Hitler himself was not even German. He was technically Austrian, and he had brown hair and brown eyes, and yet he's the one who's leading this charge for the Aryan race, the white, the blonde hair, the blue eyes, the superiority of the German race. They are also celebrating German folk culture, and they create this sort of almost supernatural element to Hitler. He's seen as the mystical Führer. Führer just means like leader. And he is seen as being almost godlike. He is not God, but he is seen as being sort of God tier, if you will. And he says, you know who's to blame? The Jewish people. You know who's to blame? Homosexuals. You know who's to blame? Intellectuals. You know who's to blame? Anarchists. You know who's to blame? The Roba peoples. You know who's to blame? Handicapped peoples. Let's go get rid of them. And I think a lot of people supported him at first because they didn't really realize what getting rid of meant necessarily. I think a lot of them were like, they'll just be deported out of Germany. Yeah, no, most of them were killed or tortured or starved to work to death. And I think that there were some people who, when they finally did realize that, maybe did step up a little bit, but there were definitely people also who were like, ah, yes, death, that is a good choice for them. Obviously, it is never okay to kill anybody except in very specific circumstances. And even that really depends on your personal moral code, and it is super specific from situation to situation. But I think we can definitely all agree on you should not kill somebody based on their beliefs or their religion or what color their hair is. That's insane. But really, I wanted to include in here, where are we going? The other direction. I wanted to talk about these anti-Jewish decrees because I want you to understand that these things start really slow. And I want you to look at the year that it starts in, 1933. So we start with some very simple, reasonably easy to defend things. So, for example, April boycotts of Jewish shops. There is nothing to stop anybody from boycotting shops. And in fact, this is something that people still do as a political tactic. You don't want to support a particular store who has, beliefs that are different from yours. You stop shopping there. So boycotting Jewish shops, there is technically, there's really nothing intrinsically wrong with that. But then when you start getting into some of these other things, police and courts no longer protect Jewish people, the burning of books by Jewish people, random attacks on Jewish people and their property, banning of kosher foods, which, for those of you who don't know what kosher is a specific style of food preparation and food content that is acceptable in the Jewish religion. For example, no pork products, or having prepared things a certain way, or creating the Department of Racial Hygiene. The Department of Racial Hygiene was created to pinpoint and then eliminate people who did not fit the German Aryan race that they were going for. So we could maybe defend April boycotts. We cannot defend any of the other things on that list. None of the other things on that list are defensible. But if you were somebody who already did not like Jewish people and had an anti-Jewish bias already built into your culture, you would probably see these as being reasonable. You would probably be saying things to yourself like, oh, well, Jewish people aren't really part of our community, so why should our police and our courts protect them? And again, that's a really slippery slope, because then it's really close to, well, that person isn't from Arizona, that person's from California. Just because they're visiting our state doesn't mean our police has to help them. And that's a really quick, slippery slope. 1934, Jewish students are excluded from exams in medicine, dentistry, pharmacy, and law. And again, people could make the argument that, well, we didn't exclude them from everything. We only excluded them from the exams. We didn't exclude them from learning about dentistry. If they want to set up their own dentistry practice without having taken an exam, they can do that. Okay, yeah, but no, it's still not fair. You are specifically excluding them for their religious beliefs. Jewish people excluded from military service. And again, this is one of those things where you're saying, you aren't good enough. You don't belong here. You're not allowed to participate in certain infrastructure components of our nation because we think you don't belong. And again, this starts back in 1933 and 1934. And these are reasonably small things. They don't feel small to us now, but these are not necessarily things that you burn down a government over. Because, you know, some of these things have happened before in the United States. Random attacks on people because of their ethnicity or their nationality or their, you know, what language they speak, that happens all the time. It's called hate crimes, and it happens all the time. So these aren't necessarily things that, or having kosher banned, we have banned Kinder eggs in the United States. This is mostly because Americans apparently can't differentiate toy from chocolate and have choked on the toys inside the Kinder eggs so many times that we felt the need to ban Kinder eggs from the United States. But again, these are small things. These are just chipping away at civil liberties that don't merit burning the whole government down, but you'll notice they start to build and build and build and build and build. So another really good example is the Jewish people being excluded from military service. Up until like 5 or 6 years ago, gay people were not supposed to be in the military. There was, in the United States, there was a sort of understanding. It was called Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And it was basically like, as long as we, you know, aren't actually aware that a gay person is in the military, they can stay in the military. So you can be in the military as long as you don't come out, essentially. As long as you pretend not to be gay, you can be in the military. And they overturned that only a few years ago. And again, it wasn't like a law, but it was there and it was a thing, and people had been discharged from the military in the past for being gay in the United States. So again, these are not necessarily things that we burn countries down over, but they lead to bigger things often, and they are chipping away at civil liberties. And just because they're not things that we would burn a government down over doesn't mean they're still not worth fighting against. But you can see it helps you to understand how not everybody immediately was 110% freaked out and looking to, you know, fix everything. Things moved really, really slowly. And also, by the time we're getting to some of these later things, like passports for Jewish people to travel abroad is being restricted in 1936. A lot of other things have been put in place that makes it really, 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 really hard for them to fight against these things. And also, it's getting more and more dangerous. So the possibility of having violence used against you, or being deported or being, you know, disappeared or something like that is preventing a lot of people from speaking out or trying to fix these things because they're afraid. They're afraid for themselves, they're afraid for their families, their extended families. It's a terrifying time. So in 1935, the Nuremberg laws deny Jewish people many basic civil rights, and they create a law called the Protection of German Blood and German Honor, which is forbidding mixed marriages. And it needs to be really clear that you could be the same ethnicity, but different religions, and you would not be allowed to marry. So you could both be, you know, your stereotypical German Aryan racial profile, but if one of you is Jewish, it is still counting as a mixed marriage, and it is not allowed. So in 1936, Jewish people are no longer allowed to vote, and they lose their German citizenship. So they are no longer Germans, even if they were born in Germany, even if they grew up in Germany, even if their family has been in Germany for the last 300 years, suddenly they are no longer German citizens. And then that gets rid of a lot of rights and privileges and protections for them as well. They, you know, lose their citizenship. Then they're banned from parks, restaurants, and swimming pools. They are forbidden to use the German greeting Heil Hitler. So therefore, if you are Jewish and you use Heil Hitler to try and hide, and somebody calls you out on it, you get in trouble. And probably very big, violent trouble for yourself or for your family. And if you do not use Heil Hitler, then everybody knows you are Jewish. So it's kind of a lose-lose. Jewish people are no longer allowed electrical or optical equipment. So even if you had, you know, maybe not taken the optometry test, but you were still an ophthalmologist, maybe? I don't know. Your optical equipment would have been confiscated. No bicycles, no typewriters, and no records. When we say records, we mean records like musical records. So you're no longer allowed to be able to type out your thoughts, to listen to music, or to travel anywhere further than you can, like on foot, basically. Passports for Jewish people to travel abroad is restricted as well. And again, this was how a lot of Jewish people got out, is they had their passports to travel abroad and then they just never came back, kind of a thing. Then many Jewish students were removed from German schools and universities. In 1938, we have special identity cards being issued to Jewish people so that they have to, like, show them. People can ask, let me see your identification. Jewish people begin to get excluded from movies, theaters, concerts, art exhibitions, beaches, and holiday resorts. So now it's not just that you can't go to like a park, you can't go to anything. Jewish people are forced to add the names Sarah or Israel onto their own as yet a further mark of they are Jewish. Kristallnacht, otherwise known as the Night of the Broken Glass, that's what that literally means in German, was a night of violence against Jewish people where something like, oh, I can't remember the numbers, but it's a huge amount of people were hurt or killed. A huge amount of businesses were looted and destroyed. Shops were set on fire. It was insane. Jewish children are expelled from German schools. Jewish passports are stamped with a red letter J. Some are removed to prevent them from leaving the country. So they had been restricted before, but now it's like you're trying to get out and your passport has a J in it. So they know and they won't let you leave, even if you didn't have any other restrictions on your passport. In 1939, when the war officially starts, technically, there is a central office set up for Jewish emigration. Oftentimes, Jewish people are evicted from their homes without reason or notice. Their radios are confiscated, so now they have basically no way to get the news except the newspaper. And there's a curfew established specifically for Jewish people. 1940, they confiscate Jewish telephones. And also in 1940, they are no longer receiving ration cards for clothes. So Jewish people are no longer able, because by this point, the war effort is in full swing, and so they're rationing clothing materials, they're rationing food, all of that kind of stuff. And so now Jewish people don't have that, I don't want to call it a luxury, but during wartime, everything is a luxury, I feel like. But they're not able to get new clothes or to make new clothes. So they have to make do with what they already have. And especially if you have like growing children, that's very, very, very difficult. I'm sure you guys are aware of how quickly children grow out of clothing. 1941, Jewish people are forced, over the age of 6, are forced to wear a yellow Star of David with the word Jew written on it in German, so it's Judah. They are forbidden to use public telephones, so there's no way for them to make calls whatsoever unless they have a friend who is not Jewish and has a telephone. They are forbidden to have dogs, cats, and birds, so say goodbye to all your pets, which is horrible. And they are forbidden to leave the country. And please keep in mind, too, that while all of this is going on, Jewish people are still being captured, are still being transported to work camps. It was really a matter of like, how much are you against the state by virtue of being Jewish or being gay or whatever. So if you were like a gay intellectual Jewish person, you were gone immediately, kind of a thing. 1942, they require Jewish people to hand over all of their fur coats and woolen items, so all of their warm clothing, and it gets really cold there in the winter. They are not allowed to receive eggs or milk, incredibly nutritious foods. Jewish people who are blind or are deaf are no longer allowed to wear armbands identifying their condition in traffic. Can you even imagine how terrifying that must be if you were a deaf person and you're trying to cross the street in a busy city and you are no longer allowed to have something that signifies that you are deaf? So you don't hear the car coming. The car is honking at you to get out of the way. You don't hear it. And then also all schools are closed to Jewish children. So again, that's just leading into 1942. And a lot of people just don't understand. A lot of people are like, well, why didn't the Jewish people just leave immediately? You know, the tide is turning against Jewish people. It's clear what Hitler is doing or what he is going to do. No, it was not. It was not clear at all. And there's a lot of things that people say, you know, I can make it through this. We can be okay. You know, we can fight against this later. The tide will turn back again. It'll be okay. You know, just because this bad thing is happening doesn't mean that we need to leave. Because leaving Leaving is abandoning for so many people. Also, it's expensive. It is expensive to pull all of your roots out and to go somewhere else. So a lot of people did not have the economic luxury, especially if we're talking about Germany in the interwar years, hit by the Great Depression and the Treaty of Versailles. Can you even imagine how many people had the fiscal means to actually move? A super small percentage. So probably most people were like, okay, we're just going to, keep our heads down. We're going to follow the rules and hopefully, we'll be able to get out at some point, or things will change, or something will happen that it won't be like this forever. It won't be that bad. And so a lot of people stayed because they thought it can't be like this forever. It can change. It'll change. It's okay. It'll go back to being what it used to be. And it took, 6 million deaths in order for that to be the case. But I want you to understand that there's a lot of things, it's just not fair for us to say, and sitting here in the 21st century with hindsight and history on our side, being like, how dumb of them to not get out. How dumb of them to stay there. What were they even thinking? Dude, they didn't know. They had no idea. No idea. And maybe some of them had an inkling, but this was so much more than it had ever been before. Ugh, that's really depressing. But it's important for you to know these things. It's important for you to know what to look for in your own communities, in your own societies, so that if your government is trying to say something like, oh, well, people above the age of 50 need to have their telephones confiscated because they can't use cell phones anyways. It's your job to stand up and say, no, that's terrible and unconstitutional and is depriving them of their civil rights. Okay, so we are going to talk about Japan really quickly. Japan was similar in some ways to Italy and Germany in that they're trying to industrialize and empire build, and that they also don't have a lot of experience with democratic policies, and they are aggressively expanding territorially. But they're distinctive because they didn't really participate that much in World War I, and they were technically a winner in World War I rather than Italy and Germany. So there is the Meiji Emperor. But again, his name, oh no, that's not the Meiji Emperor, that's the guy after him. Emperor Hirohito. He has a name, all the emperors get a title name after their, or they get referred to, like the Meiji Emperor. Meiji wasn't his actual name. So Emperor Hirohito has one of those too. But he ruled for 62 years. Here are some Japanese ladies working in a factory. So, patriotism, ultra-patriotism in Japan, they did have a pretty fair amount of democracy for quite a while. They had universal male suffrage in 1925. So we're talking about, every man is able to vote regardless of income. Men can vote. Can women? No. 1925. They actually have more than one party, politically speaking, which is great. Cabinets weren't led by bureaucrats or favorites, so we're using that merit system still a little bit. Education is expanded. Woohoo! There's an urban consumer society, so that means that there are reasonably cheap goods. There are affordable goods, like canned goods or, cloth. And they loosened some strictures for women. Looser rules for women. Woo! So they could wear, skirts and have short hair. So they can vote, but it's not like they're being completely repressed. So there's the Japanese flag. There's a Japanese aircraft carrier, or a big ship. I don't really know the difference super well. And then there's advertisements with Japanese women doing things like smoking. Oh my god. There were some issues during this time period, especially after World War I ended. So, for example, there were some rice riots in 1918 where the price was too high. Union membership tripled, and there were tenant unions. Women had their own sort of movements that they got to do. But then this leads to the ruling elite being kind of scared. So they create the Peace Preservation Law. Whenever you see preservation law titles like this, usually they're lies. and they're usually the opposite of whatever they're saying. So peace preservation means that it's brutal suppression, essentially. And it was harsh people for punishments who organized against the government, like union memberships or women's movements. Here are some women with their newspapers, and they're going out to spread information about women's rights. Yeah. Okay, so why did Japan in turn become a sort of an authoritarian power? First off, the Great Depression it makes it way easier for people to become more authoritarian because, again, economic chaos leads to political chaos. Japan in particular is hit really, 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 really hard. Their exports fall by half. Can you even imagine? Can you even imagine your exports going from, 100% to 50%? That's insane. And unemployed urban workers go home to find that there's nowhere for them to go either. So they go home looking for work back in the countryside. There is no work. There is no food. People are starving. It's terrible there too. So there's nowhere to go to find any kind of success. They also start doing some nationalist tendencies. So they start really, really, really encouraging extreme nationalism, and then they extend this when they go into these other areas. So they expand into Korea, Taiwan, Manchuria, which again is in North China. And like some of the things that they do in Korea, for example, they prevent Korean people from having Korean names, so they have to have Japanese names. Your schools usually would have almost like praising ceremonies to praise the government and the Japanese government, and to they were almost like rallies. And you would have them in school, and that was like a thing you did before class. You would all like line up and you would like chant, long live the emperor kind of a thing. They weren't allowed to learn how to read or write Hangul, the Korean script. And so there's a whole generation of Koreans who don't know how to read or write Hangul because they had to learn Japanese. And like you can't speak in Korean if you're within, hearing range of a Japanese person, because then you'll probably be beaten or something. They also, in Japan proper, they also assassinate a couple public officials, and they attempt a military coup d'etat. But there is no popularly supported right-wing party. So in Italy, we have, the black shirts and the Nazis and the fascists. In Germany, we have the Nazi Party. In Japan, there is nothing like that. And political offenders are re-socialized. They're essentially taken to like mental health camps, except it's not about your mental health and self-care. It's about, supporting Japan politically. So here are, I believe this is Japanese troops marching into Seoul, but I can't remember specifically. And I believe this is also from the Korean War in the 50s, but we will talk more about that later. So major cabinet positions start going to bureaucrats and military leaders rather than merit-based. So we're changing this. It's no longer merit-based. It is now going to bureaucrats and military leaders. We are no longer having such loose restrictions, so now there is only one news agency. That's always bad when you only have one news source. That is very, very bad. There's lots of propaganda, like cardinal principles of our national policy, and everybody is forced to read this, forced to have it on hand. We'll talk a little bit more later about Chairman Mao's Little Red Book. They also have the Industrial Patriotic Federation replacing unions. But again, it's instituted by the government. So is it really that helpful? No, because unions are working, against corporations and the government for workers' rights rather than the rights of the corporations and the governments. So when it's run by the people they're protesting against, it really doesn't work out that well. The veneration of samurai leads into the veneration of military leaders. And this actually works out very badly for a lot of military leaders as well, because a lot of military leaders, when Japan starts losing, a lot of military leaders are pressured into committing suicide because they have brought dishonor upon Japan and upon the emperor by not being militarily successful. And they do a lot of different things as responses to the Great Depression. So there's a lot of state-financed infrastructure spending, a lot of state-financed building up of weaponry, stockpiles and stuff like that. And the state is more managerial. So they're creating profit ceilings and caps on things. And while this sounds kind of good, like, oh, they can't make, I'm making money, I'm making money, I'm making money, but I can only go so high. And then the rest of this, whatever I make, has to go to something else, like employee paychecks or something like that. It's still not super free kind of a thing. And we'd ideally like to create a situation where culturally you just want to invest that much in your employees rather than the government sort of making you do that. Likewise, capping wages or prices or rent can be really good for some people, but it might not be good for other people. So if you're putting a price cap on like agricultural products, for example, you can only pay this much for rice. If there's a bad rice year or something like that, farmers aren't able to raise the price of rice. That's really hard to say. Raise the price of rice. Woo! In order to offset the fact that there was a drought, and they themselves won't have as much money to live off of. And like we've done it before too in the United States, but it's one of those things you really have to approach with caution. They were less repressive, they were more pluralistic. The press still did have some influence. It was the military and bureaucrats, whereas in Italy and Germany it was very much just the military. There really weren't that many political prisoners, and those there weren't deported or executed. And racial superiority is not directed at an internal minority. This is really important. It's directed instead at Koreans, at the Chinese, at the Taiwanese. It is directed at other people, but it is not directed at an internal minority. And they do have imperial ambitions because they are trying to take over all of these areas and do a fairly good job at all of that. That is, in fact, the end of our lecture. We will come back soon for World War II. Again, I apologize that this one was so long, but I honestly just don't feel like I can flash up all of the anti-Jewish laws from Nazi Germany without talking about them in depth. I just really don't. So, again, I apologize that this is kind of long, but these are things that we have to give a lot of time and effort and maturity to. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate your patience. I appreciate your cooperation. I appreciate your open-mindedness. Thank you very much. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.